Well, hello everyone. Thanks to each of you as you're starting to find your way in today. We'll give people another 30 seconds or so to get a seat in the theater, so to speak. My name is Luciana Cardarelli, and I'm the coordinator for Catholic Leadership Development at CPCO, and I also act as association lead for CPCO on this project. We want to welcome you here today. There's 15 sleeps, I think, until we get to December 20th. And that date, regardless of what your story is always important because it means we do have a little bit of time off, at least for respite and relaxation as we look towards the holiday season. We'd invite you, please, to take advantage of the chat function within this meeting. Take a second, give us your name, tell us where you're coming from, anything you'd like to share with the group, seeing if we can build a little community this morning before we start the learning. This work, this project, this webinar this morning actually represents year 2 of a project that OPC, CPCO, and ADFO has engaged in through collaboration with the Ministry of Education. Last year, we were able to bring to you an awesome resource that took a look at the implementation of the newly revised language curriculum, grades 1 to 8, and looked at it deeply through that leader's lens. What is the evidence of impact in terms of the work that you're doing as a staff and as a team at school? How is it as a leader I can get into that mindset and really focus my attention and my influence as a leader with particular moves and strategies, and then connect that to the incredible opportunity of rich learning for everyone that's associated with collaborative inquiry. So to that end, we embark on year 2 and we welcome you here today. Good morning, everyone, snow or not snow.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lawrence Demare, and I am a professional learning consultant with the Ontario Principals Council. And before we start our learning this morning, we want to start off in a good way. And that means acknowledging the land that we are connecting from this morning. I would like to acknowledge that we are working and deriving benefit from being on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe and the Amish-Kigo peoples, who are the inherent right holders of these territories. And of course, the land has always provided and sustained life for all of us and will continue to do so for years to come. It's really important, I think, that we recognize our responsibility for shared custodianship of this land, and that we develop a relationship not only with our Indigenous partners, but also with the land that we have the good fortune to derive benefit from. As educators, we know we have a responsibility to continue to learn, to understand deeply, and to disrupt the ongoing impacts of colonialism that are around us, both in our work and our personal lives. And one way that we can do that is to continue to develop those authentic, reciprocal relationships with our Indigenous partners. So let's just reflect on our responsibilities in that regard and our own commitments towards reconciliation and rebuilding those important relationships.
Sorry about that. You've already met 2 members of our team, Luciana and Lawrence, and now it's time to meet the rest of us. My name is Lorraine Boulos, and I'm a retired elementary principal with the Halton Catholic District School Board. I'm very happy to be with you here today, and I'm speaking to you from Burlington, which is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you today and to see so many people from across Ontario. I'm Usha James. I'm the Executive Director of the Critical Thinking Consortium. And the home of the Critical Thinking Consortium is in Vancouver, actually, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I'm speaking to you today from Toronto, on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Powley, and I am the CPCO lead for this project, a retired principal from the Toronto Catholic District School Board. And I'm speaking to you today from the Toronto region, situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples.
Good morning, all. My name is Carla Robbins. I am the OPC lead for this project, and I'm a newly retired elementary principal from the Toronto District School Board. I acknowledge that I proudly live and work on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Michi-Saagiig, the Anishinaabe, and the Ojibwe. This land, now known as the town of Blue Mountains in Grey County, Ontario, where apparently there's lots of snow today, continues to be the home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have been the caretakers of these lands for generations. Good morning, all. The team here is very excited to be with all of you today. As we heard, this webinar is part of a larger project focused on supporting school leaders with equity-driven leadership for school improvement planning and the implementation of the 2023 grades 1 to 8 language curriculum. Today, we look forward to deepening our team's learning and understanding as members of this provincial learning community. Thank you. And on to Teresa.
Thanks, Carla. So we've just shared with you on this slide some of the resources that were created for school leaders, principals, and vice principals with the support of the ministry. And as you'll notice on the slide, OPC and CPCO were able to provide a range of professional learning opportunities, as well as a resource document for school leaders to help them with implementation of the 2023 language curriculum. And you'll notice that the professional learning opportunities listed on the slide include a series of 3 webinars, and the webinars addressed the key changes in the curriculum. We also produced 3 podcasts that were focused on a critical inquiry approach to implementation of the curriculum. And you'll also notice that we've created a leadership document last year focused on those key changes chart from the Ministry of Education. And all of that is linked here for you to both the OPC and the CPCO site. The QR code should take you directly to the resources if you weren't able to access them previously. We hope you'll take a moment to do that either today or in the future. Today's webinar is a continuation of that work. We're really building on the work that was done last year, but we are going to be focusing quite intentionally on equity-driven leadership and on school improvement planning. Thanks, Bruno, for the next slide. So you'll notice that on this slide, we're just reminding everyone about the resources that have been provided by the Ministry of Education. We have been using them extensively, excuse me, in our own work, and we thought it was important to share a QR code here with you that would take you directly to some of these valuable resources. I'm going to turn it over to Carla now. Sorry, not yet. Next slide, Bruno. My apologies. I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't share with you what our goals are for the webinars that we are developing and sharing with you both today and one in the new year. So there will be 2 webinars. Today is the first. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be sharing a resource with you developed this year specifically to help school leaders focus on equity-driven leadership, and hence the title of the document, Equity-Driven Leadership for School Improvement Planning. It's been shared in the chat with you as well. And our goals today are really, as articulated on the slide, are to deepen our understanding of equity-focused leadership within the school improvement planning process. And while we continue to explore leadership strategies that support the implementation of the language curriculum as well.
Okay, to begin, we want to learn more about your thinking in regards to school learning and the improvement planning process. So we asked you to just take a moment to reflect upon your school's learning and the improvement planning process to date, and choose one of the 4 statements on the slide that best describes your current experience. Just for ease, I'm going to just read them aloud, and that will give you an opportunity to think about which one most resonates with you. So number 1, the school improvement process is a course to be run. It is completed and usually forgotten until the plan needs to be revisited with a superintendent or a group of colleagues. Number 2, the school improvement process is impactful and supports genuine and meaningful improvement to student learning and achievement. It also provides opportunities for building collective efficacy with staff. Number 3, the school improvement process is complicated, time-consuming, and lacks connection to the real work going on in classrooms and in school communities. And lastly, number 4 for you to consider, there's a great deal of support for the school improvement process in my school board. This includes access to resources, central staff, release time to work with staff and mentorship, and networking to learn alongside colleagues. Next slide. Now that you've had a moment to reflect upon which statement best represents your current thoughts or your current journey in school improvement planning, we'd really like to capture the group's collective thinking using Zoom's annotate function. Many of you may already use this function and know it quite well, but we're going to just take a moment just to review it so that everyone understands the process. We will have this information posted in the chat box as well, but just as a quick review, on your computer screen, you might find it by hovering your cursor directly over the screen sharing note that's at the top of your computer screen. From the menu that appears, click on the pencil icon. However, if you're using a newer version of Zoom, your annotation tool may appear as a green circle with a pencil icon in the bottom left corner of your screen. That's what mine looks like currently. And lastly, for those of you who are on a tablet or on a phone, please tap your screen and you'll hopefully see a gray circle with a pencil icon. Tap the pencil icon and the annotation menu will appear. Once you've activated that annotation tool using one of the ways described on this slide, the annotation menu will give you the options to insert text, draw, and stamp. I think the stamp is a check mark. So please use that. That's the function we want you to get to. Sorry, but that was a long or complicated process. Hopefully you are well, versed in the annotate function. And I am going to move us on to the next slide now. So now that we know how to use the stamp feature on the annotate menu, please select that statement that you think best reflects and describes your current school experience in regards to school learning and school improvement planning. The goal is that we will have the screen populated and provide us information about how folks across the province are feeling in regards to their current journey. Just give me a few more moments. And as I see the stamps coming in, thank you so much for your participation. It makes such a difference for us to see how folks are feeling. It seems that it's very clear that number 2 seems to be the key piece here for folks at this time. School improvement process is impactful and supports genuine and meaningful improvement in student learning and achievement. It also provides opportunities for building collective efficacy with staff. I'm so pleased to hear that, and also that in fact number 1 is something that is, that tension, and I recognize that is a tension at this point in time with the many competing urgencies that one finds themselves in the school, in their school and in their district at this time. We definitely are excited as we go through today's work, that we really believe that the conversations and the resources shared will really support all of us in moving forward in this very important work. So thank you again for letting us know how you're feeling at this point in time. Next slide. Thank you. So wherever you are in your journey, a strategic, collaborative, and equity-focused approach is essential to effective literacy leadership. We know that principals and vice principals serve as the courageous leaders of the school improvement planning process. Their strategic actions drive improved outcomes for all students. We're just on slide 11, for Lawrence, thank you. Slide 11. We know that the principals and vice principals serve as the courageous leaders of the school improvement planning process. Their strategic actions drive improved outcomes for all students, especially those who've been historically and continue to be underserved. These leaders engage in critical activities such as gathering, analyzing, and interpreting relevant data, identifying student learning needs, co-constructing goals, engaging in professional learning, and monitoring student progress and achievement. Equity-driven leadership lies at the heart of transformative education. It means creating pathways where every voice, every learner, and every story can thrive. The implementation of the 2023 Ontario Language Curriculum really offers us a meaningful opportunity to commit to a vision in which all children, all students they feel seen, heard, and empowered to succeed. Next slide. In order to support your school improvement planning efforts, the implementation of Ontario's revised language curriculum professional learning resource was created. This resource was thoughtfully developed with equity-driven leadership at its core, ensuring the conditions are in place for students, staff, and communities to thrive. The graphic shown here illustrates our current thinking about school improvement planning. It synthesizes key elements of the school learning and improvement process. These elements are understanding the learner, co-constructing goals, interpreting data, and responding to data. Additionally, the resource offers opportunities for school leaders and their staff to really deepen their learning and understanding. These include, in the sections that you'll find in this resource, possible leadership moves, staff inquiry questions, and evidence of impact indicators. Each element encourages deep reflection, which is essential for supporting school leaders throughout the process. Principals and vice principals who reflect upon their leadership, identities, and privileges are well positioned to lead powerful, transformative change within their schools. You will notice that the link to the document is provided, and it is provided there for your reference. There's not really the opportunity really for you to delve into it, but you may want to take a click on it right now just to browse the website, just to get a sense of what you notice and what you're thinking, and just sort of maybe mark it for after this webinar is over for you to have an opportunity to see a little bit further the opportunities for learning and conversations with your staff that are a part of this resource.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We said that the document is focused on taking a critical inquiry approach. And so we want to walk the talk in this webinar and ourselves take a critical inquiry approach to our learning and our thinking today. And so we've created an overarching critical inquiry question. And if you are taking an inquiry approach in your school as an administrator to the professional learning that's there, it's something that you might consider is what is the inquiry question that is driving your school learning this year? We often use the language of inquiry without attaching it to a question, but really that's at the heart of inquiry is a question that resonates with people, that they are grappling with in their own minds, and that they are compelled to engage with for a sustained period of time to develop their own abilities and their own learning. So the overarching critical inquiry question that we have come up with that we hope can support learning here is how might we use the school improvement planning process to meaningfully transform the outcomes and experiences of those students who are not being supported by our current practices. Now that's our question. It wouldn't be the question, obviously, for your staff, but that's our question as an example. And you'll notice the language here is very deliberate. The students who are not being supported by our current practices. And so we're being really careful about what we're attributing student, where the student support needs to be. At the Critical Thinking Consortium, we don't just talk about one inquiry question, we talk about a cascade of inquiry questions. So we have broken down this overarching question into 3 lines of inquiry that might help us be a little bit more specific. So those lines of inquiry are as follows. So first, well, who? We're talking about kids, but whose learning and well-being benefits from our current practice? And whose learning and well-being is adversely affected by our current practices? Which students? Which populations of students? What do we know about that? The second line of inquiry is what? Which classroom practices and school-wide practices might we affirm? Might we say, yep, these practices are supporting students? Might we adjust? Might we say, you know what, we're doing this thing, but we have to tweak it a little bit. We have to refine it a little bit. Might we adopt? So there might be new practices that we haven't done before that you hear about from your colleagues in this webinar, from others, and you want to take them on. And what practices might we abandon to better serve all students? And I think that's a really important one. We need to be comfortable abandoning practices, and we're going to have to. And finally, the final line of inquiry is around how are we going to do that? And so as an administrator, what are your key leadership moves that can support thoughtful and impactful implementation and move forward all of these pieces? Now, we're going to try something here. We'll see how it goes. And if it doesn't work for you, it's okay. Put things in the chat box. But we're going to sort of go out of Zoom for a second and invite you to use a Padlet. The Padlet is a space where we can collectively see each other's thinking. We call that a thought book. It's a place where you can start your thinking and revisit your thinking over time. So I'm asking if you would either use the QR code on the screen, or there's a URL in the chat box. If you go there, I'm going to share the Padlet on the screen in a minute. I'm just going to give people a minute to get the QR code if they want it. And then I'll share the Padlet on the screen. And please take a minute to share your initial thinking under any of the columns. So what are you noticing in your building about whose learning is benefiting from our current practices and whose is not? Are there particular practices that you're focusing on in your school, changing, affirming, adopting? And are there some key leadership moves that you are really focusing on this year? Okay, I am going to stop sharing this screen and share the Padlet. I can see people arriving there. And we're just going to give you a minute to start putting in some thoughts. So you press the yellow plus button at the bottom, and it will allow you, sorry, not the yellow plus button. Under each of those columns, you can press the plus sign, and it will allow you to add a comment. Thanks for getting us started, folks. I love the way that Padlet uses these unusual monikers for people. Thanks so much, folks. We are already seeing lots of really interesting thoughts coming up here. You can also actually heart or comment on other people's comments. So if you would like, if you see something go up there that resonates with you, and some really key leadership moves that are arriving as well. We are going to keep this open. We invite you to keep it open on your screen if you have it as the webinar, and we hope to return to it at the end of the webinar and add more ideas to it as well. And I hope you'll get a chance to look at it in the future and see what other people are saying as well. I'm going to go back to the slide share. So Bruno, I will stop sharing. And someone else will share the slides. So we're going to dive into some particular pieces of the document and some of the thinking that we've done. We've identified 4 different categories of action. We're talking about equity-driven leadership in service of the new language curriculum and implementation of the revised language curriculum. And we know that there are categories of actions that are related, if we're going to, do this work in a good way, to acknowledging systemic inequities, to examining personal and collective biases. There's a whole category of actions related to identifying and disrupting barriers, and a category of actions related to reallocating resources for equity. I'd like to invite you to be a little bit vulnerable, and if you would share in the chat box is fine. What do you see as one of your strengths, and what's an area that you would like to develop? So if you had to look at these 4 categories of actions, where do you think you're on the way? What's a strength that you have as a leader? And where's an area you would like to do some more thinking or learning or development? Maybe I'll just be quiet for 30 seconds and invite you to share, if you don't mind, in the chat box, a strength and or an area that you'd like to further develop. Thanks so much for getting us started. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how many people are recognizing their strengths in examining their own personal biases, acknowledging personal and group bias. And now it's sort of, now what? So how do we actually disrupt those barriers? How do we actually look at the data to guide us? So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate the vulnerability there, and the identifying of where you would like to spend some more time. The resource, go ahead, Bruno. Yes, thank you. The resource that we've shared with you looks at those categories of actions within an inquiry approach that supports sort of thinking about these various elements of what you do as a leader in your school improvement planning and in your instructional leadership. And so it takes an iterative and a sustained sort of approach to thinking about instructional leadership, to thinking about school improvement planning. So with equity-driven leadership at the center, the document invites you to think about and enter into it wherever you think you would like to spend some more time. It's not linear in its approach, and it asks you to sort of identify those strengths that you already have or the areas you'd like to further develop. It has these 4 elements in it. elements around understanding the learner, so which does absolutely think about data, elements about how do you co-construct those school goals that everybody buys into, how do you interpret the data, how do you respond to the data. So we'd like to dive into each of these sections really quickly and give you an idea of what's inside of them and give you a sense of what you might find and what you're thinking about as you enter into them. Then. So the first section on understanding the learner. We would like to invite you to think about right now, how are you understanding the learners in your building? We've asked you on the screen to identify this year what is the most compelling data that you've examined thus far that's informing your thinking about the direction of your school plan this year. So I'm sure you're looking at lots of data, and sometimes I think personally, I feel like we all have far too much data. So I'm asking you to narrow. What is the most compelling data you've examined thus far that's informing your thinking? And it could be related to literacy, that's what we're here for. But what are you noticing in data that's emerging in your school? How is it helping you understand the learner? So let's just start with this simple question. What is the most compelling piece of data that you've examined so far? And if you'd like to add more to it, that's fine. But if you'd just like to share the data source, we're happy with that too. Take a moment in the chat box. Thank you so much. So many interesting ideas related to a particular piece of data that's rising to the surface for, for you. I really appreciate the variety and what people are saying. We've been trying to reframe data as a form of guidance. Data, as you know, can get everybody's backs up. And it can feel like an accountability stick. And I know many of you are doing things that are engaging staff with data in really productive and helpful ways. One of the ways that I think I've been talking to people about is if we were to see data as a form of guidance, we all need guidance when we don't know what to do, when we're stuck, when we notice that our plans and our practices are not working. So where do we go for guidance? We go to a friend, we go to a colleague, we go to the research. But if we start to think about data as a place we could go for guidance, that it might show us something that we don't realize, we might be hungrier for it. So thank you for sharing all of those pieces. You'll see a number of things inside of the document that might give you some questions that you might ask, some ways of engaging with inquiry with your staff around understanding the learner. Another part of the document is around co-constructing school goals. And we just wanted to ask you really quickly where you are in your journey of identifying school goals. We know that all districts are at different points in the school improvement plan. And we're just interested in knowing where are you at in identifying goals for your plan for this year. Student goals, educator goals, or school-wide goals. I'm just going to give you three options. Are you right at the beginning? Are you on the way, or are you done? Knowing that it's a living document and you're going to have to revisit it, but are you done for now? So at the beginning of identifying goals, on the way or done. Thanks, folks. Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of different stages that we are at. I'm going to offer a strategy if you are at the beginning or seeing it as an iterative way. One of the ways I like to frame the goals for the year, by the end of June 2025, who will be able to do what that they aren't able to do yet as a result of my leadership? Who will be able to do what? And that will become the new normal for September 2025. And if you can narrow that down to something that's reasonable and manageable, that can be really helpful.
Thank you, Usha. As you and your educator teams are exploring and reflecting on the data, as well as thinking about your goals, of course, one of the things that you're going to be thinking about is how to interpret that data to guide instructional practices. And this will include discussions about the ways in which current practices have to be adapted or evolve to ensure an evidence-based approach to instruction as described in the revised curriculum. The framework and the questions that we have on this slide, we think can support that collective action towards instructional practices that support implementation of the curriculum, as well as your school equity goals. When educators work together, they can consider and affirm current practices that are showing a positive impact on student learning. They might want to consider current practices that have to be adjusted to ensure the needs of all learners are addressed. And they want to adapt to new practices outlined in the curriculum, especially those practices that we are now identifying as evidence-based practices around explicit and systematic instruction. And you'll also want to have a discussion about practices that may need to be abandoned because or discontinued, given the requirements of this revised curriculum, along with what we know about research in literacy, and equity-focused goals. This section of the leadership document related to interpreting data provides you with a variety of suggestions for leadership moves, inquiry questions, evidence of impact indicators, and a leadership reflection that will support interpretation of the data that can inform decisions about instructional practice and responsive instruction. And of course, along with interpreting data, leaders and educator teams are going to want to respond to the data as they consider plans for professional learning that will support curriculum implementation and the development of collective efficacy. This slide highlights the importance of leveraging existing structures for professional learning while building additional responsive opportunities for staff to collaboratively learn and plan together. School leadership teams will want to ensure that structures for professional learning are representative of a range of diverse staff strengths and experiences. And it will also be helpful to offer opportunities for differentiated learning for educators. And this may be done by working with divisional teams, literacy-focused committees, and other professional learning networks that provide multiple entry points for educators with varying degrees of knowledge and experience. At the heart of all this work, of course, is collaboration and co-learning. School leaders, educators working together to co-construct professional learning goals, school improvement goals, and thinking about what success will look like. What is that success criteria that we want to be developing that is student-centered and focused on equitable outcomes for all students? And I would just invite you to, if I could ask for the next slide, please, Bruno. Thank you. I would invite you to think back to the Padlet that we were contributing to earlier in the webinar. And please take some time to continue to contribute to that Padlet. Perhaps your thinking is evolving as we're sharing some of the ideas and some of the content from the resource that we've shared with you today, along with some of the examples that have been provided. So just a reminder to kindly continue to contribute to that Padlet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lorraine.
So Teresa mentioned that school teams respond to the data by organizing some professional learning that will support and nurture something called collective efficacy. As a leader, as Usha was saying, we have so much data that we can look at. And a lot of the data, of course, most of the data that we're looking at is actually data about our students. But as leaders, we can also look at the data about our staff. What are our staff beliefs and understandings about their own abilities? So what evidence can we gather about the staff's feelings of their own effectiveness and ability to impact student outcomes? In the document, Equity-Driven Leadership for School Improvement Planning, there's a section included called Responding to Data, Professional Learning, Collective Efficacy. And this was included because collective efficacy is actually ranked as the #1 factor influencing student achievement. It's defined by John Hattie as a shared belief by a group of educators that they have the skills necessary to improve student outcomes, and it's 3 times more impactful than socioeconomic status and the home environment, and twice as impactful as a student's prior achievement. When educators have collective efficacy, they believe that they can have a positive impact on student learning. So they place student achievement of all of their students at the heart of all of the decisions that they make about their instruction. So if you're using this document that was created to help you make thoughtful leadership moves, focus on the evidence of impact, support staff inquiry, and your own leadership reflection, you will actually be supporting the development of educator collective efficacy in the building. And you can learn more about this from Jenny Donahue's book called Collective Efficacy: How Educators' Beliefs Impact Student Learning. So Usha was talking about how we use inquiry questions. So school improvement that actually involves an inquiry process with a collaborative approach actually ignites collective efficacy. So when a teaching staff has collective efficacy, they keep track of their results, they share them collectively, and they learn from them together. They believe that they have the skills and the ability to positively impact change for their students. They monitor the impact of their actions on student learning, and collectively they reflect on the results of their teaching practice so as to better serve all of their students. In other words, they're using an inquiry approach to their practice, and they see the classroom as a laboratory. So they're constantly investigating new and more effective teaching and learning strategies. They essentially are researchers of their students. So they hold high expectations for all students, and learning is seen as a collective responsibility. And that actually leads to collaborative problem solving amongst the educators. It really does take a village. They're not afraid to challenge existing system structures and to take actions that promote fairness and justice within the school environment. But most importantly, they believe that the decisions they make in their teaching practice will impact student learning. And so this is really important because educators who lack efficacy are more reluctant to change their practice. They don't believe their actions will make a difference. They don't believe their actions will impact student learning. So they're not motivated to make any kinds of changes. So there are actually 5 conditions school leaders can use to foster collective efficacy in their buildings. Firstly, it's important that principals and vice principals support educator influence by encouraging their voice in decisions about their practice and within the school. Principals and vice principals who see their staff as competent and capable seek their input into the decisions that are made around practice and school decisions. Secondly, it's helpful for educators to have knowledge about the instructional practices their colleagues are using in the room next door. So what impact are those strategies having on students? We actually learn a lot vicariously from other people's experiences. So these impact us, and it's really important that colleagues have a chance to know what's going on with their colleagues, what strategies they're using. The third condition is goal consensus. Everyone has to agree on what the goals for improvement are, and they have to believe that those goals are actually achievable for them to have buy-in. It's also important for principals and vice principals to be responsive to the needs of their staff. So responsive leaders provide educators with the resources they need, but they also protect them from issues that might negatively impact their practice. And this can be as simple as providing common planning time for colleagues or protecting valuable instructional time from the many disruptions that can happen during the school day. And lastly, effective systems of intervention can be put into place to support the students who are not currently thriving in the building. So here are some practical strategies that leaders can use to promote collective efficacy. So you've heard us talk over and over again about the use of data. It's critically important. Educators benefit from seeing the fruits of their labor and attributing the results to their actions. When educators see improvement in student learning and they connect that to their own actions, they develop the belief that they can make a difference. It's helpful for educators to regularly engage in conversations with one another around student achievement. They need to discuss what do they value and how will they know when students are successful. When a staff gets together, instead of talking about the students, the curriculum, the resources, if the conversation can be focused on how are we going to impact student learning. And then educators with collective efficacy have high expectations that all of their students can learn. And so they meet regularly to discuss achievement. And perhaps they might bring along with them some artifacts from student work and really question, does this demonstrate reasonable growth for this student in this amount of time? And lastly, principals and vice principals can promote the conditions for educator collaboration. For example, leaders can provide opportunities for teacher moderation of student work and incorporate discussions about progress of goal achievement during professional learning network meetings, school leadership team meetings, during staff meetings and divisional meetings, if that's possible. And now I'm going to pass it back to Carla.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. We have definitely covered a lot of information today, and I hope we've really piqued your curiosity or maybe confirmed some of your thinking through the conversations in the chat box and the Padlet, etc. And now the thought is like, where are your thoughts now from the beginning of the session until this point? What's percolating in your mind about next steps? So for our final activity as a group, we'd like to revisit our Padlet. This time, what we'd like you to do is go to the last column where it's labeled how. Please share one new idea, from today's learning that will guide you as you continue on your next steps in school improvement planning. These ideas may have been something you were thinking about all along, and maybe today it was confirmed, or maybe in fact they are new. I think it'd be really helpful for all of us to see some of those new ways of thinking and what those next steps will be as documented in the how section of the Padlet. I'll just give you a moment to do that. It would be great to we're going to have the Padlet shared in just a moment, just for us to see what the collective thinking is at this time. And as you know, you'll have access to this, and maybe this will be helpful for you to discuss later with your teams. Yeah, lots of good thoughts. Thank you. Our intention around having these opportunities for us to engage in this virtual space, but still get the collective understanding of what's happening in the province is really to really begin that learning community around school improvement planning. And we hope that you'll be able to use some of these insights in your various contexts back at your districts. I'm going to ask us to go on to the next slide, please. Thank you so much for the contributions. Slide 26. Thank you so much. So there's a lot to consider and a lot of things that I know are niggling with you as you consider your next steps in the school improvement planning process. But we want you to leave you with, the powerful words of Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings. I know many of you know this particular quote, but I think it resonates with this particular process. Education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it. This new curriculum is that opportunity to provide those equity of outcome and equity of achievement for students in our communities, so that they can, with their families, be a part of a world that was better than it was before. And we truly appreciate all of your participation and your insights that you've shared today. The exchange of ideas really helps create better opportunities for the children all over the province and in the communities that you serve. So what's next for us? We are really excited that we will have a second webinar, and that is scheduled for March 4th of 2025, where we will continue this learning journey, a provincial learning journey. And in that session, we will definitely dive deeper into the resource and include perspectives, we hope, from principals and vice principals in the field, because we really want it to be a meaningful opportunity and really hear and lean into some of those stories from the field directly that can help support all of us in this important journey and in this important work.
And if I could just add to that, Carla, the QR code that takes you to the survey, your responses are absolutely critical for us. We use that information when we report back to the ministry, and it lays the groundwork to present new proposals for new projects that support leadership. We're the only groups in the province that are building tools by principals for principals, by principals and vice principals for principals and vice principals. And so your voice through these surveys sets the ground so that we can continue with this work.
Thank you very much for sharing that piece, and definitely something that is critical for this process. We really want to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the system, and we have the opportunity to really advocate on behalf of your needs and have meaningful sessions that's really going to support the incredible work that you'll be doing. So as Luciana has shared, the QR code is on the screen, and we really invite you to share your thoughts and ideas with us so we can continue learning about effective, equity-driven school improvement processes that reach every learner in every district.
I want to take a second to thank everyone who's part of this team. They've thought long and hard. They bring to bear their lived experiences, their leadership stories, research from across Ontario and beyond in pulling this all together. Your responses today have been really gratifying, recognizing the thoughtfulness in its design. Once you dig into the resource that's been created here, I think that those sentiments will be amplified all that much more. To everyone, remember, 15 sleeps, we can all make it. We really, really want to thank you for taking time and spending an hour of your day in December with us. We appreciate that greatly. We look forward to seeing you next year on March 4th. Thanks, everyone.